To give a quick example of some basic commands, we're going to go into Quick Play and we're going to go to TIST, Cyril E. King Airport in St. Thomas in the United States. To set up the airport, you can choose the weather conditions from up here. We're going to go for a bit of light cloud and for an 8 AM morning shift, and we're going to keep it all default with the databases, airplane set and the radar style. You can also change the date as well, which will affect obviously when the sun rises and sets. We're going to go for the 19th of August 2024 on this one. We need to also choose our runway, which you can do by clicking the space either side of the runway numbers, and we're going to get the aircraft coming in from runway 28. All that's left to do then is just click start game. And once you're in the airport, you'll be greeted with the tower itself. You have the entire room to choose from. You can click on any of these desks and it will then relocate you to that desk whenever you press the F1 camera and go back to that, F1 being the standard camera. F2 looks at the left-hand screen, the ADIRS as we call it, ADIRS. F3 looks at the central screen, which is your radar for approaches and any aircraft in the air. F4 then looks at the ATIS information, and obviously you can change the runways, turn on the airport lights as well if you want to. F5 is your strips, where you can move them around, and if you click go sometimes it will automatically move to the necessary section based on what runway you've chosen. You'll have all your departures in blue, your arrivals in orange. The F6 console is very useful for typing out commands to the aircraft or deleting aircraft if you need to. The delete button will come up here. If I select an aircraft, for example, you'll see that there is a delete button, we can get rid of it. There is also commands on here, so you can just choose what you want the aircraft to do by clicking buttons if you don't have a microphone available to you. A new option in the game is that the aircraft tags appear above them while they are either on the ground or at least on your screen, and this makes things a lot easier when it comes to knowing who you are communicating with. You can change a lot of the very different elements of the radar screens as well with these sliders on here.
St. Thomas Tower, value 1115 on final 28.
So value 1115 has just called up to tell us that they're on approach and they're coming in on runway 28. What we want to do then is basically give them landing clearance. What we want to tell them is value 1115, runway 28, clear to land. It's worth holding the button down to speak to them for a little bit longer than you need to, just to make sure that the voice recognition can pick up everything you've said. You can see the text come up at the top. Now we're going to move on to FeelThere 4873. Now they're going to be taking off on runway 28. But before we get them to taxi or do anything else, we're just going to tell them to push back from the gate and which runway they can expect to be using today. FeelThere 4873. Pushback approved. Expect runway 28. And you'll see the route highlights up and it tells you what they're going to be looking at. Another thing, if you want to focus on the aircraft, that you can do is going to the settings. No, ignore this. And before you know it, the aircraft will begin to push back. The tug will go up to them and they will push back onto the taxiway, and you'll see a little line or a little route here that highlights where that aircraft is going to be going. As you can see, the aircraft is now pushing back from the gate, and they will push back in this direction and get ready to head down towards runway 28.
St. Thomas ground, FeelThere 4873 ready to taxi.
So the aircraft is now ready to taxi. The tug has left them and moved over back to the terminal, so we'll give them taxi clearance. And we now need to check which taxiways they're going to use. You can see that they'd use Alpha on the way down there. You could also tell them to go via Charlie Alpha because they are already on Charlie. But you can tell them just to use one taxiway on the way down. You don't have to give them every single one. So we will tell them FeelThere 4873, runway 28 via Alpha. And the aircraft will now begin to move.
FeelThere 4873.
You can move around the airfield, by the way, using the WASD keys, forward, back, left and right. E and Q move your camera up and down, but if you want to return to any of the cameras before, you can just press F1, F2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, and then back to F1 to look at any of your screens. There is also a setting in the game to focus on aircraft. I've set this to the Alt key in my case, and I have it set so that when I let go of the Alt key, the camera goes back to where it was before. Here we can see FeelThere 4873 making their way down towards the runway. Value 1115 is still on its way into the airfield. This ring shows you where the 5-mile mark is. I tend to not clear any aircraft to take off unless there's an aircraft outside of this 5-mile radius. So what we'll do is wait for that aircraft to come in before we give FeelThere 4873 takeoff clearance. Although, I don't think they're going to get down there in time. We're down here at runway 28 where FeelThere is just getting ready to go, and value 1115 is making its way in. Now what we can do to FeelThere 4873 is tell them that once that aircraft has registered that it's landed, they can line up on the runway by saying FeelThere 4873, runway 28, line up behind next landing aircraft. So as soon as value is now registered as landing, FeelThere will move automatically onto the runway. You can see they've already started their movement now. Value will roll down to the end of the runway, and then we need to figure out where they're going to taxi to. You can see here that they're going to go down Alpha into Charlie. We don't have to necessarily tell them Charlie, as long as we give them one of the taxiways on the route that we definitely want them to touch, and that will be, of course, Alpha. You don't have to wait until they've vacated the runway to give this command either. You can tell them before they've even got off the runway, so they just carry straight on. Value 1115, taxi to ramp via Alpha.
Taxi to ramp via Alpha, value 1115.
And now they've vacated the runway, we can then speak to FeelThere 4873, who are waiting down there for us. FeelThere 4873, runway 28, cleared for takeoff.
Runway 28, cleared for takeoff. FeelThere 4873.
And they now start their takeoff roll. You can also give the aircraft clearance to speak to departure as soon as they get past a certain altitude. We would do this by saying FeelThere 4873, runway 28, cleared for immediate takeoff. Upon reaching altitude 1000, contact departure. But in this case what we're going to do is give them manual contact departure clearance once they've taken off. So once they've got past the end of the runway, we can tell them to contact departure, and that will mean they are no longer on our radio frequency. And you'll also see that their tagline here goes from yellow to grey because it's no longer under our control. FeelThere 4873, contact departure.
Departure on 124.0, FeelThere 4873.
And that's some of the basic commands that you can get used to here on Tower Simulator 3. It's great to have the game overhauled like this, and we hope you enjoy it.